Welcome to the history of the Earth. First, let me briefly go over the very short history of the universe and the Earth. What I'm about to say is based on the information provided by scientists. For example, they state that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, give or take 200-300 million years. But basically, let's say it's close to 14 billion years. It probably doesn't matter much to you whether it's 13.8 or 14, my dear. It is believed that our magnificent Earth has existed for 4.5 billion years. The Earth, in its early stages, did not sit in the void of space like a stone in the middle of the universe. It is believed that until 600 million years ago, the land and seas did not have the forms we are familiar with. However, it is believed that the first mammals appeared on Earth 200 million years ago. As for the dinosaurs, there are those who claim that dinosaurs do not exist and that all of it is nonsense. I have nothing to say to that. Science indicates that they went extinct 65 million years ago for some reason. It is said that the confusion arose when some people claimed that Prophet Adam was born on a certain date, while others argued according to evolution that it dates back between 500,000 and 200,000 years, which is as far back as 500,000 years ago when humanity first walked on the earth. Call this species of humanity whatever you want, whether you say primate, monkey, gorilla, human, or even mammoth, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not concerned with that part. I leave my opinion on this matter to you. Think what you wish. I jump back to 200,000 years ago. At that time, humans were bipedal, but likely had different issues than we do today, such as problems with hair removal. They had long beards and body hair. They would cut it with stones. There were no razors for shaving. Even though they were very much like Brad Pitt, people were wandering around the earth. No matter where they came from, there is something here. When we look at these people, they were making simple tools. In other words, they knew how to tie a stone to a stick and hit another's head with it. They also knew how to throw stones or sticks more or less to hunt an animal. In a very simple sense, they had moral values as well. They valued their dead and buried them in a place. They did not leave the dead behind and go away. As you can see, prehistoric times are divided into various periods. I used to get bored in history class. It didn't seem like necessary information, but the important thing is this. As you can see on the screen, in prehistoric times, we are particularly interested in the Stone Age and the Metal Age, because we will cover the historical periods later. This video will go up to 00 BC. Until that time, they find materials like cobblestone, knot-mat stone, and silestone, and then they discover copper. Copper remains very soft. They find bronze, and then they discover iron. Finding these means that they can actually melt and use them. Moreover, they do not immediately use every metal they find as it is. Sometimes they make jewelry or other decorative items from it. Other times, they learn to make weapons. Various civilizations make very good use of the power of metal. Now we come to the fun part. How did humanity spread across the earth? This is also a piece of information provided to us by scientists. They say that, as you can see on the screen, the findings related to the first human begin around Africa. 100,000 years ago, they diverged from Africa. It is believed that they arrived in India in 77,000 BC. They reached Arabia in 74,000 BC. In 74,000, it is said that they arrived in Arabia. They emerge in Western Asia around 50,000 BC. And during this period, people are seen in Western Asia. By this time, humans are capable of making intercontinental crossings, crossing rivers, and navigating seas. Using rafts they constructed themselves. They are quite intelligent indeed. Moreover, they can create weapons that are somewhat like their own crafted works of art or various small traps, and so on. In other words, these people know how to use tools and they enjoy migrating. Don't worry, I won't just provide historical facts. We will go into great detail. It will be in the style of Haluk Tatar. Let's continue. They arrive in Australia around 45,000 BC and are in Turkey by 40,000 BC. Now there is something that confuses us in the lessons related to this. The oldest societies were in Turkey and Arabia, or rather they were not the oldest societies. The earliest settlement and urbanization came together in Turkey. We will also delve into its story. The events even go back to Çatalhöyük. Therefore, we need to understand Mesopotamia and Turkey correctly. But in 40,000 BC, they are in Turkey. One branch coming to Turkey is heading towards Arabia and, for instance, Africa, while also going to China. The other branch, as you can see on the screen, is moving towards Western Europe. It takes them 8,000 years to reach Japan. They are in Japan, in 32,000 BC. Now we will pause here. In 23,000 BC, A cooling begins around the Earth, a global cooling. This cooling prevents humanity from spreading further north. It allows them to move further south. Those who could remain in the north, let's say those who could survive, are not really heading towards the poles. Those who remained in the north became stronger against the cold, and as their noses and other features changed over time, it is believed that the differences in skin color and the width or narrowness of nose structures observed today between an Asian person and an African person are all due to the changes in those races over the years. As you can see on the screen, BC. The cooling 23,000 years ago led to the last ice age from 21,000 to 18,000 years ago. The last glacial period, the Earth has experienced various glacial periods over time. It has cooled, warmed, but this is the last glacial period. The last glacial maximum creates an impact on the screen. This refers to around 20,000 years ago, about 22,000 years ago. It is the moment when the sea level is at its lowest because the waters are naturally freezing. Then, of course, the ice melts, just as glaciers are melting today. They were also spreading across the Earth by melting at that time. During that period, the glaciers were so extensive that they were eliminating a significant amount of seawater, making today's seas 120 meters lower. Just imagine. I am speaking about that period in Europe, where they are seeking refuge in France and Spain. During the freezing period, the number of game animals naturally decreases. Humans may be decreasing, but the animals that feed on grass and herbs are also declining for some reason. And now, as the animal population decreases, humans are developing tools like spears to make more efficient use of them and becoming skilled in hunting. On one hand, he is developing a nomadic lifestyle to constantly escape the cold. On the other hand, he is learning to make clothing and dress more warmly to protect himself from the cold. If you look at Rota Seya's book today, or watch his videos, you will see primitive tribes living in hot countries, completely naked. I will say, they just wrap a piece of cloth around themselves. But during this period, humanity discovers clothing. They learn to wear animal skins. Around 15,000 BC, people begin to inhabit northern Europe and Siberia. There is a certain beauty to this era. Humans are learning to live together with animals. I won't call them dogs. I will call them wolves. In fact, they are domesticating them to protect themselves against other animals. Therefore, our friendship with dogs and wolves dates back 17,000 years, adding 2,000 years to the 15,000 years since the beginning of the era. Do we have such an old friendship? Some don't even last 17 years. When we reach 12,000 years before Christ, everything will be renewed. The earth is like paradise, fragrant, exquisite. And the animals are multiplying. The animals to be hunted include the large, the small, and those living in the trees. Everywhere is filled with prey animals, and they are well fed. There are even some that do not run very fast. As people hunt these, they become satisfied. As they become satisfied, of course, the population increases. They begin the part of fighting and mating. This intercourse is causing the Earth's population to explode. I am currently bringing you the world population by year on the screen. You can see how enjoyable the rise is. By 10,000 BC, we can say that society had become social for humans. This is because the concepts of trade and barter emerged. During this period, humans are not producing. Keep this in mind. Do not think of people farming like in Age of Empires or like in computer games. In 10,000 BC, humans are still eating what they find. They are consuming what they find. Do not forget that this person is more around the Anatolia region and the Mesopotamia region. Of course, in history, as you will see shortly, we will also look at America, South America, China, and India. However, they used the obsidian stones found in the Middle East and Eastern Anatolia to make tools and weapons. Interestingly, the stones found here are also seen in the Eastern Mediterranean. In exchange, various valuable shells such as mussels and oysters that were found along the Eastern Mediterranean coast were used as a medium of exchange, during that period serving as a substitute for money. These shells are found in Eastern Anatolia, up in the mountains. Therefore, it suggests that these people traveled back and forth to trade over these distances. Now you might ask, how many kilometers is it from Eastern Anatolia to the Eastern Mediterranean, right? No man, these people are walking. Think of it that way. They are not riding horses or getting on planes to fly after all. One way or another, they managed to ensure transportation. Yes, but it's a long distance. This means they have started to trade with each other. You will see this trade or exchange in the Sumerians. It will lead to the invention of writing. This will lead to the invention of money. People invent writing and money because there must be an easier way for our deals. They create it to keep track of accounts. I will soon explain the history of the Sumerians. I won't forget to explain. You might ask, teacher, didn't they really ride horses? Well, this is BC. In 10,000 BC, dogs were already our loyal companions like Rin Tin Tin, while the closest evidence related to animals, specifically horses, dates back to 3500 BC. Around 3700 to 3500, the Botai people lived in North Kazakhstan. The Botai people rode horses, and also benefited from the meat and milk of the horse. While we are making friends with these dogs, and so on, the bow and arrow are invented around 7500 BC in just 8 days. The bow and arrow are revolutionizing human nutrition because they can now silently capture things from very long distances. They take fewer risks and are less likely to die. Otherwise, they would enter into a fight with 7 common enemies attacking nature, but like this, they can take them down from a distance just like a sniper. This bow and arrow phenomenon not only makes it easier for people to obtain food, but also allows some individuals who are not necessarily strong, warriors, to hunt. Thus, not only the strong survive, but the intelligent also begin to thrive. Now, as they start to feed themselves, we see that by 7500 BC in Çatalhöyük, Konya, people have grown tired of wandering and have settled down. They are also urbanizing, meaning they start building houses and protecting themselves. This urbanization will eventually revert to livestock farming and then to agriculture. Why can't you farm after urbanization? Because, you plant the wheat and it doesn't sprout in 15 minutes. Or if you planted an apple tree, it doesn't bear fruit for you right away. At that time, it was more about grains like wheat, barley, etc. You need to stop and wait there. While humanity spends winter in caves and summer elsewhere, this does not happen until cities form. Both agriculture and animal husbandry start. The first grain is wheat. They sow wheat. Note these are domesticated grains. They are the grains. They learn to sustain and grow to keep bread alive. Then rice will be added in the same way, and humanity learns to eat. They learn to consume what they produce. Finding food in nature allows you to roam over larger areas. But if you know what you will eat next year in a certain order, and there is no disaster, then you can comfortably feed, expand, and reproduce. The invention of agriculture during this period brings forth something interesting, a completely new invention. There are 4 to 5 inventions that I will tell you about in history, and I love them. Free time. You might ask, how can free time be invented? In the past, humans were occupied with escaping, sleeping, fighting, and making love. Now humans have plenty of time because they no longer need to chase after prey as much as before. They can grow grains, fruits, and vegetables in various ways. Don't think they were eating avocados back then, but they had leisure time because they obtained energy from grains one way or another. Do you know what happens during leisure time? They start developing traps. Engineering is advancing. They are learning to speak magical words to make the next hunt more fruitful. They are learning to talk to nature, the sun, and the moon. In other words, religion is beginning. You might even think of them as shamans. We can't call them shamans, but these tribal leaders and religious leaders become very powerful later on. Politics and all that, the governance of the country, everything. You will see it in Rome. I will also tell you about the Vatican. These are the people who sit on the sidelines without hunting, waiting for the food to be brought to them. Religious leaders are generally composed of the elderly or the powerful. One way or another, leisure time is starting to become profitable. We will see this as idle people living inside temples in Egypt. They were actually intelligent people who managed to scare others in terms of religion and belief by using their knowledge of astronomy. Another thing that emerged during that period was art. Leisure time gives rise to art. They begin to create cave paintings. They start carving stones to make dolls, human figures, or animals. As a result, these people begin to produce and trade these items. Leisure time turns people into religious figures, strategists in warfare, commanders, and on the other side, engineers. Making traps is also considered a form of engineering. Or a doctor who can make medicine from various notes is doing it. One way or another, the equivalent of today's professions was like that back then. Agriculture and animal husbandry are developing. Do you know where? In the Fertile Crescent, James Bradford is the first to use this name. The area we call the Fertile Crescent is currently the southeastern part of Turkey that you see on the screen. All of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Mesopotamia are within this crescent. Where is Mesopotamia? Well, the place you see on the screen is in Mesopotamia. You will hear a lot about Syria and Lebanon. That is, Israel, the Palestinian territories, present-day Syria, Lebanon, the city of Canaan, the Phrygians, the Phoenicians, and so on. You will hear a lot about these. Don't let your mind wander too far to America or China when thinking about these lands. They are all territories in Iraq and Syria, located south of Anatolia. We will always wander around the place where the Mediterranean meets that sea. The Mesopotamia you see on the screen was so fertile because it was nourished by the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The term Mesopotamia actually comes from the Greek language. Mesopotamia means the land between two rivers. Which two rivers? The Euphrates and the Tigris. All great communities and all great civilizations have been established around rivers. Now, when you look at Egypt, the Nile makes life easier. You will see that the Indus Empire, as well as the Ganges and Indus rivers, can also be found in South America. If the rivers had not nourished them, we would not have seen those great civilizations like the Olmecs, the Aztecs, and so on. Rivers change life significantly. Now, when I come to Egypt, I will tell you about it. The Nile River in Egypt is a river that overflows and facilitates agriculture. In other words, it nourishes and irrigates the land by overflowing and then receding. It's not like that in Anatolia. There is no such transportation. Rain and water are carried by you. However, some civilizations have shown genius and incredible intelligence in water engineering, building water channels, and transporting water to the lands. Let's return to Mesopotamia. The area shown, barley, lentils, chickpeas, peas, vetch, and flax were being cultivated. It is believed that they also raised goats, cows, pigs, and so on as part of animal husbandry. The people of this land became so valuable that after a while, wars began over this land. But we will get there. Right now, think of a small gang, like the peoples clashing with each other, with 50 to 100 people hacking at one another. Humanity is not that wild and organized. If you ask how the population is increasing, let me bring this table back to the screen for you. As you can see, there were 3 million people in the world in 10,000 BC, but agriculture and animal husbandry increased this number to 10 million by 6,500 BC. 10,000 BC. First urbanization starts Göbekli Tepe. In 7,000 BC, seen at Çatalhöyük. This is a very important piece of information. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe before Çatalhöyük is a new finding that has significantly changed the world's perspective on history. You see it again on the screen. Of course, these figures are estimates. Please don't say strange sentences like who went and counted, etc. There were 200,000 people in 130,000 BC. But around 2000 BC, there were 50 million people. At the exact point of zero, where we will arrive today, there are 200 million people. So, we will talk about the entire history of humanity today. We will only reach a place that is twice the population of Turkey. After that, of course, the world population is going crazy. As you can see, in the 1800s, there were 1 billion. In 1927, there were 2 billion. In 87, there were 5 billion. And now there are 7.5 billion people on Earth. It's heading towards 8 billion. Even back then, when there was famine, I can't imagine the current scarcity, but let me explain without going into it deeply, just skimming the surface. I discussed this in the series, Who Rules the World? You can watch it. Artificial foods have been developed so that this many people can be fed. If you don't, trick people with human-made, genetically modified corns and such. This world won't have enough grain. And in 3000 BC, the third greatest invention is coming. The plow. Rice is being cultivated in Africa. The plow is so important that it facilitates agriculture through animal power. It's like a tractor. Today, in Anatolia, a tractor or a combine harvester is similar to a plow, and humanity is going crazy. The population is exploding again. Humanity is truly making feeding easier, twofold or threefold, so much so that cities suddenly multiply and begin to cut down forested areas. This period marks humanity's first assault on nature. As you can see now, we can easily cut through all the mountains and build highways, but back then it wasn't that easy. The first wheel and sled were invented around 3500–3000 BC. The Sumerians are the ones who brought the wheel together, attached it to an axle, and attached it to a cart. In this video, I will tell you about the history of the Sumerians. They are the most intelligent human community I have seen, the most civilized society, because they invented writing, interest, making money from money, and in a sense, the wheel. The Sumerians' invention is changing world history. People are now making trade and transporting goods from one place to another much easier. And therefore, if various communities have wheat while others have marble and only olives, no one goes hungry. They trade with each other and their palate develops. So you could say that olive oil stuffed grape leaves were actually invented during these years. I'm just joking, of course. As I mentioned earlier, the Sumerians not only invented the wheel, but also created writing. The reason for inventing writing is this: trade is constantly taking place. There needs to be a record of these trades. Some people are entrusting their grains to the government, the state, the church, or temples. Naturally, there needs to be a record kept of them. They begin to write cuneiform on clay tablets. Don't think of it as a nail like we know. Think of it more as something with sharper edges. Therefore, they are inventing writing. As you can see in the examples on the screen, it may not be very readable, but the problem is that if you entrusted the grain to a place, and that place will return it to you after a certain period, like a year later, it is keeping it safe from thieves and so on. Since he benefits from it, he also uses it in trade. So at the end of the year, or the end of the term, he gives you the interest as well. He gives it in the form of whatever type of grain you provided. Since money had not yet been invented, a salute to the Lydians coming up shortly. Therefore, interest is also being invented during this period. Do you know how interest worked back then? If you were lending barley, it was an annual rate of 33%. So, 3. For a scale of 3, they give you an extra scale. If you are giving a total of 3 buckets of barley as a deposit, they return 4 buckets to you. At that time, there is something valuable: silver. For silver, the rate is 20%. This issue of writing is important. As you can see on the screen, cuneiform writing doesn't resemble our modern writing system very closely. However, it is not as primitive as the scribbles made by tea vendors on walls. As a result, hieroglyphs in Egypt developed writing around 3000 BC. By 1300 BC, China transitioned to writing. In 600 BC, Mexico invented writing. These systems are independent of each other, meaning they do not learn from one another to develop their alphabets. In fact, there is no alphabet. Lines and shapes can convey certain words or sentences as they are. Not readable, the hieroglyphs of the Egyptians. Do you know until when? Until 1799. In 1798, 999, Napoleon invades Egypt. During the invasion of Egypt, the Rosetta Stone is discovered during an excavation that takes place during its reconstruction. Interestingly, the Rosetta Stone is the translation stone for the languages of ancient Greek and Egyptian hieroglyphs. The stone you see on the screen actually dates back to the time of Alexander the Great, when the Egyptian language, which we can refer to as Coptic, was spoken there during the earlier conquest of Egypt. It was created for translation into ancient Greek. It was lost and found during the Napoleonic era. And humanity begins to read Egyptian hieroglyphs. In 1900 BC, the Chinese developed the alphabet that they use today. The Greek alphabet emerges in 800 BC. By the year 600, the Chinese began writing on dried animal parchment. The taste of humanity resembled something until 4000 BC, as they were discovering grapes and olive oil during this period. Rice is being cultivated in China during this period. They are starting to eat rice. Even today, the strange ones are eating rice. But this is the reason why Anatolia and the Aegean have been continuously rich in olive oil. For 6,000 years, these people have been bringing grapes to olive oil. The value of grapes is this: grapes are something that will later be made into wine, and you will see that Greece will produce wine, and this wine will become the most valuable thing in their possession. The Sumerians are such an important society that they were the first to speak the same language, fight for one another, and establish a large-scale civilization. The Sumerians are so intelligent that after coming together to develop trade and learn to write, they are also trying to expand. In fact, we divide the history of Mesopotamia into 2 parts at the year 2300. Before 2300, there is the magnificent dominance of the Sumerians. The period after the Sumerians is very complex. We will get to that. I will tell you about the Hittites and Persians shortly. I know it's a long video, but bear with me. If we look at civilizations that could compete with the Sumerians historically, there are the Egyptians from that period. The Egyptian civilization is also quite ancient, but it was divided into Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt for a long time. The unification of Egypt occurred much later. The Lower Egypt is represented by the falcon-headed god Horus, while the Upper Egypt is represented by the vulture-headed goddess Nekhbet. Around 3000 BC, King Menes unites two kingdoms, and Egypt gains its first pharaoh. Göbekli Tepe is very important. Göbekli Tepe has an architecture, and it is believed that people were somehow in the late period of animal husbandry, which changed the perspective on world history. By 2650 BC, the Saqqara Pyramid. By the year 2589, the construction of three large pyramids begins in Giza, Egypt. Today, there are pyramid structures in many places around the world. A group of people known as ancient aliens is trying to connect these things. They say aliens did this, aliens did that. At that time, as one went higher, it would inevitably topple if stacked. The shape of the narrowing is not a very ingenious idea. It is quite normal for pyramids to emerge independently in various parts of the world.